Some people run toward the fire long before anyone is watching, long before there were podcasts, social media, or thank you posts. They didn't do it for recognition. They did it because someone had to. Tonight's guest is one of those people. If you've lived in this community for any length of time, you've heard the name Malcolm West. Not because he chased attention, but because he showed up over and over again on the worst days of people's lives. Malcolm served in the early days of EMS and the fire service, when equipment was limited, protocols were still being written, and experience was earned the hard way, one call at a time. He stood on scenes that changed him, carried stories that stays with him, and helped lay the foundation for the first responders who come after. This conversation isn't about glory or highlight reels. It's about real calls, real consequences, and real people. It's about what the job takes from you and what it gives back. Tonight we sit down by the fire to hear the stories, the memories, and the moments that defined a life of service. This is Fireside Chats, and this is Malcolm West's story.
Falls when the lights grow dim, but the dark remembers all of him. Ashes of a gentleman scattered in the rain. Every victory carved from pain. No crown, no throne, no one to blame. Just smoke and the echo of my name. Ashes of a gentleman carried by the wind. The story ends where it begins. Raise your glass, my time has come. Play one last song, then I'm done. I build my own.
All right, Malcolm,
Good to be here.
man.
This is home.
I tell you what, people have been blowing me up ever since I posted that picture, which I didn't think anybody would know. Everybody knew who it was. And congratulations on getting mayor.
Thank you. Yep, got to go through November and get one vote. I think I've got my wife convinced maybe to vote for
Maybe.
me. So, but the people have been good to me over the years. I've been in a lot of elections. I've won them all so far. Knock on wood. But I'm as excited for this. This is my hometown. This is me. This is where I grew up, where my family grew up, and I'm excited about things. The city's in great shape, and we want to continue to keep it that way.
Yeah, and I really think just the fact that you've won everything you've ever run for, I think just that right there shows what kind of person you are. I mean, I can't tell you, I've never been on a call with you where you don't talk to anybody. Somebody always is like, "Hey, Malcolm," every single time. I've never.
My wife and I were traveling out of state. We were in California one time. I was working for Bruco, and we got an Uber from the airport to Bruco's headquarters out there. And the Uber driver saying, "Talk a minute." I'm sitting up front with him. He said, "I know you." I said, "You know me?" He said, "Yeah." So you're from Kentucky, aren't you? I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "My brother and I used to race at Beach Bend Park and Bowling Green. I announced at Beach Bend for years." Mm-hmm. And he said, "You're the announcer up there. I recognize that voice." In Los Angeles, California. I thought that was great. So
I tell you what, you can never commit a crime. You'd get caught.
in a minute.
Yeah,
I couldn't put a mask on. And just the way I walk, I've got the funniest walk you've ever seen. And so people were, when I used to be a professional wrestler. A lot of people don't know that. Myself, Troy Walker, several others.
Oh, yeah.
We professionally wrestled.
What was your wrestling name?
I was the masked medic. I was under a mask because everybody recognized me.
Oh, that's good.
With that, but when I walked into the ring, they knew who it was.
Yeah,
just the way I walked. So,
yeah. So, for people that, which is very few, but for people who might be listening that don't know you personally, how do you usually introduce yourself? Who is Malcolm West?
Malcolm West is an old country boy. Grew up in Nelson Creek. My grandmother, Ella West, raised me. I spent the week with her. My mother passed away at a very young age. Mm-hmm. I was 6 years old when she passed away. And my dad had relocated in Chicago. And so years ago, when I first started running for office and so forth, my daddy was a moonshiner. I just throw that out. Everybody was back in those days. And I was a little embarrassed about that until I started knocking on doors. And this guy said, "What's your name?" I said, "Malcom West." He said, "Yeah, I know your daddy." He said, "He was the only one who used to sell us moonshine on credit." So then after a while, I had a lot of support because of my dad selling moonshine. So, but everybody had a moonshine in a holler at Nelson Creek back in the 50s and 60s.
Gosh, that's so fun. Sold it on credit.
Sold it on credit. Sure did. Sure did.
That's pretty good. So when you look back at your life in service, what's the first role that comes to mind? Would it be EMT, magistrate, or just community member?
Well, being a dad, I got two wonderful daughters and 4 grandchildren. And I think just watching my uncle work in the logwoods all of his life, working a sawmill, but he had the best common sense of anybody. My aunt used to feed every police officer, every firefighter, every ambulance guy in the county on Sundays.
Yeah.
And I'd be sitting in there with all the Bruco executives, and we'll be talking about all these projects. My uncle had a 6th grade education. And we had this problem, and he would solve it for us. He said, "I don't know much about all that stuff, but what about this?" He's right. So common sense plays a lot in all my day-to-day decisions.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's very scarce nowadays.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But as far as in the community, I've been a fireman, back since 1974. I listened to Bubby Anderson, who's one of my heroes. Bubby was a trailblazer.
Oh, yeah.
They fought the system. Bubby Anderson, Mike O'Neill, Chief Bob Stover in Drakesboro, Chief Phillips at Bremen. They fought the bureaucracy to get our fire departments going. So we owe a lot to those guys.
Oh, absolutely. That's one reason why I wanted to start this, because these guys are passing away and nobody knows their story.
They don't.
And that's why I started this.
Bubby and I went to EMT school together, and we took turns driving, and that's the first Long John Silver's ever ate at, because we didn't have one here, and they had one in Madisonville. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we ate at Long John Silver's in Madisonville. Oh, wow. But he was the one who encouraged me to continue on my EMT, because I wasn't very smart. Maybe I wasn't smart, I just didn't pay attention. And so I got by and passed the course. But thanks to Bubby Anderson, and then fast forward to Logan and Zach Adams' grandfather, Tommy Dickerson, the fire chief at Beachmont. I lived up there at the time, and I was selling cars. I was going to drop my EMT, and Tommy Dickerson dropped by one day and said, "You're going to go recertify." Back then, you had to go recertify every 2 years. I said, "No, I'm going to let mine go. I don't need it." "No, you're going with us, and we'll pick you up Saturday morning." So thanks to Tommy Dickerson, David Penrod, some of those guys at Beachmont, or I wouldn't be an EMT today.
Yeah, and Tommy is actually who I started. He was my very first fire chief when I started volunteering. I started under Tommy. And the knowledge he's got is just
unreal.
Yeah, I mean, you can't put a price tag on it. Like you said, he was one of those trailblazers, too, that just...
Well, one of my heroes here, in talking about Tommy, the things they had to fight, as far as I was in ambulance services, still are, but still am, whatever that proper English is.
It works.
But started out in hearses. Joe Whitworth worked at Tucker's, and he'd call me and says, "We got an ambulance run. Can you go with me?" I said, "Sure." So I would meet him at Tucker Funeral Home, and we would take the red light off the shelf and run it through a plastic hole in top of the hearse and tie the wires together. And the siren was no wind-up siren. It was mounted under the hood. Mm-hmm. Here we take off in one of these Cadillac hearses, go pick up the patient, and then back the hearse back in, take the light off, and it becomes the hearse again for the funeral part of it.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that. Bubby actually told me that the last one we did. Bubby told me they used to run the hearse, and they would just pick them up, take them to the hospital.
A lot of times we would do CPR on a patient in the back of a hearse. Of course, there's no headroom in a hearse. Most of their patients don't raise up. They just lay down there. But doing the CPR, we'd leave the stretcher at the scene and then have to go back and get the stretcher later. But and we used to gather down here and watch the TV show Emergency. And whatever they had on their squad, we had to have on our squad, whether it be a light or some type of kit. And John Soder was the leading force on that, of ordering things for our squad, because Emergency had it on Squad 51.
Yeah, we still watch that. When it's on downstairs, we still watch it.
You probably laughed at, but that was state of the art for us back then.
Yeah. Those guys, we all love that show. So you were one of the first EMTs in the county.
Well, not necessarily. I was like the second wave of the EMTs. Okay. Rodney Phillips, chief of Bremen, was one of the first. Mike O'Neill was. Then Bubby and I came in kind of on the second wave. My certification number is like 3282. There was like 201, 202, things like this. So we've learned a lot, watch everything change, and I'm going to hold on to mine as long as I can. I'm going to have a walker with a red light on it.
We'll get you in there.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, we'll still take you. So what did EMS look like back then compared to now?
Well, it's amazing now. The paramedics can give drugs, life-saving drugs, but they basically, I tell people, we bring the patient care to them instead of us taking them to the hospital, which ultimately we do, but we can do the same thing in the back of the ambulance, the paramedics can, that they can in the ER. We didn't have that luxury. Now, we had oxygen, of course, we could do that, and we could bandage them up with all of our fancy bandages, but we could not give drugs like they can now. So it's really changed a lot.
Wow. Yeah.
Especially the helicopters coming into the service.
Yeah, and I've seen you guys even like diabetic emergencies is a big one. You'll go in, they'll be about half out of it, and y'all go and give them IV right there. They don't even usually go to the hospital.
No, they don't. And that's amazing how to watch them recover and come along and just how things are changed. Make you wonder what's going to happen in the future. And a lot of people don't realize this, but back then we did mouth to mouth. We didn't have the bag mask or the luxury equipment. That sounds morbid now, but that's how we did it, and that's how we were trained in doing it.
Yeah, it's
just part of the deal. And I look back now, I go, ugh. Yeah. But it's just that's the way we were trained.
So, what made you want to get into it, medical services in the first place?
This is funny. Driving, I used to drive by the fire department here. I had the old open cab trucks and things. When I was a kid, my aunt would take me to town. I stayed with her on weekends. She worked at GE in Owensboro for 36 years and did exactly the same thing every day, which drive me nuts.
I'd go crazy.
But she encouraged me to be involved in the community. I owe her and my my uncle a lot for raising me and giving me the opportunity to be sitting here today. But that's how I got into it. And then I got to know Joe Whitworth and some others. They were on the fire department. I thought it's cool to have a red light on your car. How do you do that? In fact, Jimmy Moore, who's longtime member here as well. Mm-hmm. He had a better job than I. He worked in the mine, so he could afford all the cute little things of red lights and sirens. And if there was a new siren came out and we already had a new one, we had to sell that one and get another one. And once we get all the equipment, we put our equipment on here in the city building. And then once we get it on and there was a fire run, we'd drive to the other end of town and come through town to try out our new equipment.
Got to make sure it's working.
Make sure it's working.
Got to make sure. So, do you remember your very first call?
As an EMT, I do. It was a fatality. It was my best friend. He lived at Nelson Creek, and we got on the scene. I just got my certification. I was in the squad, and I was got there, and his dad was already there. He had a car wreck, and obviously we knew he was deceased. And his dad looked at me and said, "Malcom, this is your buddy." He said, "You got to help me. Nothing could be done." But you talk about toughening a skin for your first run.
Absolutely.
I was either going to quit or really get into this business.
Yeah.
And that worked. I stayed with the business. I always say good things come out of bad things.
Yeah.
And that was a good thing that encouraged me that I need to do this because I need to help others. I couldn't help my buddy, but I can help other people along the way.
Yeah. Well, you actually, I don't even know if you know this, but my aunt Nicole had a car wreck in the Drexboro curve. And she was stuck in the car down under that hill, and she says that she can't remember nothing, but she remembers you crawling in the car with her and talking to her while they were trying to cut her out.
Wow. I get those stories all the time. I had a lady come up the other day and said, "You don't know me, do you?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, you delivered me in the back of an ambulance coming into the city limits of Owensboro, like in 1979, I think it was."
Wow.
And now she's very successful. Apparently I did okay on delivering her and helping.
That's the reason she's successful.
That's the reason she's successful. I'll take that.
Yeah.
But it's just humbling sometimes that you see. Now I'm picking up the people in the ambulance. I used to pick up their mother and dad. Now I'm picking them up. The kids and the grandkids and things like this. So you took my grandmother to Louisville one day. I remember that. Things like that. So it makes you feel good.
Yeah. Well, there's always two people that everybody always mentions every time we go on a call, every time we do anything. They always either mention Malcolm West or Johnny Hawker.
Right.
That's who they always mention.
And Johnny Hawker, of course, he was a professional wrestler with us too.
Yeah.
And I use the word professional loosely. But now, all kidding aside for John, he was very good at and EMT and very good at wrestling. And if he had had some guidance on his and money behind him, he could have went to the WWE or what have you. He's really, really good. But you're right. What's that old hawker doing today? And so that makes it worth it right there.
He actually started wrestling not too long ago. He was older then. Remember that? A couple years ago, he wrestled for a couple months or something, and then he said, "I'm too old for this now."
Well, our director, Troy Walker, was the ninja. Of course, he's a little skinnier then. Something happened along the way, but he was the ninja. And we traveled. We go to French Lick and wrestle, and we wrestled everywhere. There was a guy in McLean County who was kind of a director. People think that wrestling's fake, and to a degree it is scripted. But we had a team called the Dogs of War. They were almost 7 foot tall each. And so you take a guy 7 foot tall that holds you up over him, that's 3 more feet. There's 10 feet that they throw you on the mat on.
Yeah.
That hurts.
Yeah, you can't script that.
Those screams of agony aren't fake.
Yeah,
They hit me. So.
Yeah, exactly. So you've spent roughly 50 years doing this job. So what keeps someone committed that long?
Well, it's interesting because sometimes, and you can attest to this, you've been at it a long time too, you get burnt out, you get tired, but then you have that one run.
Yes.
That one run. You may have 60 runs where you get somebody on the floor or somebody who doesn't need a rescue squad or an ambulance, but that one kid that you helped, or like your aunt, you get out of a car. That's what it's all. That's what fires you back up and say, I want to continue to do this.
Exactly. We had a car wreck, and there was 2 girls that were really hurt. Well, we get them cut out, they get them loaded and take them off. Well, then 3 weeks later, we're all sitting downstairs and the phone rings. It was one of those girls.
Wow.
And she called and she said, "I just wanted to tell you guys I'm out of the hospital. I got to come home today, and I had to call y'all and just say thank you. I don't remember the car wreck, but I remember the men talking to me while they were cutting me out of the car." You're exactly right. After that, we got a couple new guys that were actually on that scene, and they were like, "Wow, that's never happened to them before." Make a lot, like you said, a bunch of calls. It's not really much, but then that one gets them fired right back up. So they have been gung-ho ever since that phone call. So.
Well, we'll watch. We got on especially a fatality. Mm-hmm. We had one kid that was on this department. He made that fatality. He quit. I can't do this. Yep. So it's you either do it or can't do it. And you figure that out. And I've done it for 50 years on multiple departments. And I've going back to Bubby Anderson. He was really talking about when you go down on drownings. Now it sounds to the general public it's a morbid way that how we find bodies is basically we have a hook on a pole and we drop that in the water and it hooks into the body. I don't have to clean that up and say it. Yeah, and a lot of people can't do that. Now I made a mistake one time. We were dragging for a victim down at South Carrollton, and they were already out in the boat, and I was up on the bank. I walked in with all my fire department stuff on. I'm up on the bank. I'm hollering at the guys in the boat. I said, "Y'all caught anything yet?" Just being funny. I didn't realize the family was sitting right down there on the left, so I was mortified.
Yeah.
They took it. They were okay with it. But, our humor, people may not appreciate our humor sometimes, but it gets us through the bad cases sometimes. It's our own therapy.
Yeah, that's exactly. Because sometimes I've said stuff before in a room full of people and not even think about it, and the whole room just looks at you like you're an animal.
Right.
And I'm like, "Oh, sorry. You're right. Humor is what gets you through it."
It is. Humor gets you through it.
Speaking about things like that and seeing your friend in the car wreck, what are some moments that still stick with you even after all these years?
Well, the fire truck wreck that Bubby talked about.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly when it happened. Labor Day weekend, 1978. Young EMT. I was at my aunt's house. They paged out supposed to have been a wreck with the injury out Highway 70, 181. So I come rushing to the station, got into the pumper that eventually wrecked. I'm in that pumper already. Well, Joey Johnson was our dispatcher. We dispatched at the fire department, had a radio downstairs. I'm in the truck. Tim Gray comes in. He's one of our firefighters at that time and gets in the squad. Joey comes over to me and says, "We need an EMT on the squad. Why don't you go ahead and go with Tim in the squad?" I got out of that pumper as Wayne and Lonnie, that were killed, getting in the truck. And so they took over the truck. I went in the squad. We respond to the wreck. Nobody's hurt. They cancel us. Then they page out another wreck. which happened to be the fire truck on Highway 70. And the way it was foggy that night. I can still smell the smells and hear the sounds.
Yeah.
Like it was yesterday. As we popped over the hill, we had, of course, the turning lights then. We didn't have the LED lights.
Mm-hmm.
It hit the reflective, and we knew then it was our fire truck at a wreck.
Oh, wow.
And Lonnie Sapp was still trapped in the truck. Wayne had been thrown from the truck, and both obviously died instantly. And Bubby mentioned about what caused the wreck. It may have been the linkage of the accelerator stuck by expanding water hose, radiator hose.
Uh-huh.
The reason they thought that, the very next week, the sister truck, I was responding on a run on the parkway. That's what happened to me. It actually, the radiator hose swelled up, trapped the linkage against the frame, and I could not get it to stop. But I'm on a straight stretch, so I just shut the engine down. They didn't have that luxury. If that's what happened, we'll never know to this day.
Yeah.
But they gave our, and I want, one of the biggest things I want people to remember is these two guys. When I'm long gone, I always post something every year on Facebook about their life, and I want to celebrate their life more so their death. But they had regular jobs. They didn't get in that truck that night to say, well, this is it for us. They didn't know that.
Yeah.
They were just going to go help somebody.
Yeah.
And I don't want these young guys coming on here. They'll say, well, who's Lonnie and who's Wayne? What's that plaque for? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, it meant a lot to us back then, especially a young 18, 19-year-old firefighter seeing his two fellow fighters. We're supposed to be super people. We don't get hurt. We don't get injured, but we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes in a big way.
I've heard this story, since I've been on here, but I've never heard it like that. I have calls that I can still smell,
right.
And hearing you say that's just wild. Stuff like that's still with you long after.
Yeah, we had a girl that burned up at a house in Pattontown, and the ambulance service where the subway is now, it's an old funeral home there. And I tell the workers that's an old funeral home, and it scares them. I said, don't go in the basement. Because we used to, Dee Sparks, Mike Sparks and I were EMTs, and we were stationed there in the ambulance, and we made our house downstairs. If we needed a wall, it was the casket room. We just put up a sheet, made an extra wall. But it was some fun times. But this little girl burned up a house. We went running down there, trying to get into the front door. We didn't realize that the door to her bedroom was actually had a big piece of wood. It was nailed shut. So we had no idea. We couldn't get through that door. I always kind of beat myself then. If I went around to the back window and crawled in, maybe I got her out. But I kept trying to get to this door and never did. But just things like that. But now sometimes we have some funny things.
Oh, absolutely.
Billy Bob Dukes, who's been a long-time member down here, he and I were on Moorhead Street, a house fire. The little girl's dog was still in there. So we suited up. We did put a Scott Air mask. They were sissy, like Bubby said. You didn't wear Scott Air packs back in the old days, but at that time we did. So he went one end of the trailer. I went the other, and I found the little doggy under a bed. So I come out just holding this little dog in my arm like, Billy Bob, I beat you. I found the dog. But he and I were also at a house fire at South Carrollton. We fell through the ceiling and landed in a feather bed. And all this tar had already melted, and we come out, had feathers all over us, like feathers. Cartoon characters as we come out. So you have good and bad stories you remember.
I actually have that newspaper clipping that you got in the newspaper for saving that dog.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
We've been going through old stuff here. Old pictures we're redoing, putting all the old stuff up that's just been stored for 50 years. And I found a newspaper clipping of you holding that dog. Yeah.
I had a lot of personal things going on. And it was just one of those things. It seemed like God takes care of you on things. I mean, it was dangerous going and getting that dog, but we saved it. We saved the dog, and it made me feel I needed to feel good that day. Yeah, and that made me feel good.
Yeah, and I mean, some people, their dogs are their kids.
That's it.
So I mean, to us, it's just a dog. To somebody else,
it's a kid.
Yeah, exactly. So anytime we think we can make a push, and even if it's a lizard, and we think we can get to it, I'll push it.
Right.
We'll try to get it for them. So how do you think first responders were viewed then versus how they're viewed now?
I think, well, the social media has changed everything, whether it be politics or how you go on vacation or what your profession is. And there are some experts on Facebook that don't have degrees in being firemen and first responders, things like that. So when you're standing and you're loved one is needing an ambulance or rescue squad, to them it takes forever. Mm-hmm. That ambulance and fire truck 6 days to get here. Yeah. And actually, you look at and we can go to dispatch, know when they went in service, know when they went on the scene. Maybe it took 5 minutes. To that person who's not used to this business, that 5 minutes is an eternity. I think we're more respected now with all the TV shows, from emergency to 911. And there was one that William Shatner used to host, that was 911. And they always had real bad stuff, but they always lived at the end of it, and they had a picnic with the victim on every show. Everybody lived. But unfortunately, in real life, not everybody lives. Yeah. You want them to, but not everybody lives. But I think social media and television has changed. I think we have more respect now. I think people respect us.
I believe so. I believe it's more publicized now. Like you said, with TV shows and everything. I believe you're right on that. What do you wish the public understood better about EMS and emergency services?
That we just, especially on the ambulance service, we just don't come rush them to the hospital. You'll still read that in the paper today. So-and-so was rushed to the hospital.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to get Tim Carver, one of our paramedics, fired up, do that. Yeah. But because we have a running joke when Tim and I years ago, we'd go on a scene and people would say, well, will there be somebody back there with them? Like we're both going to get up front, but they don't understand that we bring the care to them.
Yeah.
We got the rescue squad pulls up. We can start life-saving measures really quickly, have a lot of equipment on the squad. You've got the paramedics who come along who can put them on heart monitors, who can shock them. We can shock them too with the squad with our AEDs.
Yeah.
But people just still have that in their vision, like, what are they doing in that ambulance? They've been sitting out there with Uncle John. Yeah. They've been out there for 15 minutes. What are they doing? Having a party? He needs to get to the hospital.
Yes.
Well, they're doing the same thing that the hospital would do. And that's the misconception.
Yep. Right there. And we have to explain that to, just like you said, just about everybody. Because we usually wait outside the ambulance. That way, if you guys need anything, we get in and help. So, transitioning into public service and politics, what point did you realize you wanted to serve the community beyond emergency?
As far as my service?
Yeah, like when you went for a magistrate. I don't know all the positions you've held, honestly.
What got me involved in government and politics was the Kennedy assassination.
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching that on television, and it really affected me. I became a Kennedy fan. I read everything, read every book. When I went to school, we didn't have internet.
Yeah.
I would read encyclopedias in the library at break, and I'd read about the Kennedys, and I'd read about not just Democrats, but I'd read about Republicans. I'd read about Lincoln, all these people. And that's what got me involved in politics. And I ran, my first office was a countywide office. I ran for county clerk.
Mm-hmm.
Our longtime county clerk, J.C. Knopfsinger, retired, and I was elected. I was the youngest county clerk in the history of the state.
How old were you?
I was 24.
Wow.
When I was elected. Maybe 21. I think it's 24. And Mr. Knopfsinger said, you regret running for this office because back then they did everything by typewriter. They could make a title, do everything in office. When I started, that's when the computers came into play.
Oh.
And they didn't work for 3 months. I couldn't issue one license as county clerk. My poor girls out front they were getting bombarded, and they said, this new young Democrat clerk has come in here and put these fancy machines in here. And literally county clerks across the state were throwing their computers out the window because they wouldn't work. The programs were wrong.
Yeah.
And so I feel for Crystal Smith now. She does a great job as county clerk, but she went through that. She had some computer issues last year. And I said, I know how you feel. But that's how my service started. I started there was a fellow by the name of J.E. Blair. He was involved in a local campaign, and for some reason I got to know him. He ran for mayor and got beat bad twice, but I thought he was my hero, and so he'd be proud of me today knowing that I'm going to start filling the mayor's office. But that's how I got started in politics. And then I left. I went to work for a congressman. He went to jail. That didn't work out too well for him. And I was going to run for Congress. But that didn't work out. Then I got back involved again. I ran for magistrate, won that back in the 90s, served 8 years. Then I got involved in racing. I traveled the NASCAR circuit, doing a lot of announcing, and then I worked for Bruco doing the marketing part of it. And then I got back and ran for magistrate again, and still magistrate today. So I appreciate the support that people have given me.
I've never heard anybody say anything bad.
Oh, I can give you some names.
Oh, I'm sure.
Well, that's the funny. You can't please everybody, whether it be in any job you do. You're checking out at Walmart. that's your pride, that's your job, but you'll make people mad. And the same thing in some of the decisions that I make in government, I make some people mad. I try to make, longtime county judge Philip Stone was my hero. And he told me one time, he said, you make a controversial decision and you can go home and lay your head down at night on the pillow and go to sleep. You made the right choice. And so again, going back to common sense, I try to make a common sense approach on the votes and decisions that I do.
I didn't realize that you were magistrate, then you left, and now you've came back and did it again.
Yeah, see, back in the 90s, I served 9 years. There was a 5-year term there because of redistricting. They had to add an additional term, which I liked. It was all right with me, 5 years. But I'll tell you a funny story on that. I was running again 8 years ago for the magistrate, as I am now, and I was down in Clayton. I knocked on this guy's door. He said, "What's your name?" He's real gruffy. I said, "Malcom West." He said, "Malcom West." "Yeah." Said, "I hope you're better than your daddy," because my daddy's name was Malcom West. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, when he was running for magistrate, he promised he'd fix that ditch out there, and he never did." I'm thinking, my dad didn't. Wait a minute, that was me. But I did go back and fix his ditch. But yeah, it's sometimes it will bite you a little bit, but I love telling that story now.
I just blamed it on my dad. You're right. I can't believe you didn't do that.
I said, yeah, he said, I'll do better. I did tell him he'll do better than. I can tell one funny story. Bubby mentioned Bill Hardwick, longtime fire chief, but when I got on the fire department, he was chief. Well, the building used to be next door to us here, the city building, and the fire trucks faced is where the drugstore is now. Well, there was an apartment house. It was an old house turned into apartments. A friend of mine had an apartment there. This is for the drugstore. This is Lester Motors was over there. So we're in the bedroom calling. We could see there's a fire pole, and you could see where the fire truck sat. Bill Hardwick, I don't care if the city was burning down, at noon on daily, he took a shower. He slid down the pole. He had his towel and soap and everything, and the shower was in the old jail, as Bubby mentioned about us being jailers. And so he would slide down the pole and go get his shower. Well, we'd give him a few minutes to get all lathered up and stuff. We'd call the fire phone. Of course, they didn't have caller ID then. You call 2, 3, 4, 5. That's how he'd say, "Fire department." He'd come out naked as a jaybird out of that shower and answer that phone. You could see him behind the fire trucks there, and he'd hang up. He'd be cussing. He'd hang up and go back in. We'd give him a few minutes. We'd ring it again. Here he comes. But Bill Hardwick was he was a visionary too. He looked at things in the future, and he built our fire department up, and just a great guy indeed.
Yeah, I don't know when he stopped being fire chief.
I don't remember. He served a long time, as Bubby said, and a great guy. I worked for Farrell Christmas. I got in trouble with Farrell one time. That's Ricky Deason's dad, Farrell Christmas stepdad. There was down here on the railroad track on Center Street, the big viaduct. There at the time had a lot of coal moving back and forth in the coal days. Well, that coal would fall off on the side of the bank, and it would catch on fire. Spontaneous combustion, catch on fire. He told me one day to go down and put that fire out. Yes, sir. I took the engine down there. I hooked up an 1.5-inch hose, and I started putting it out. Didn't do it. I used a little rubber hose first. That didn't do it. Then I used 1.5 inches. I hollered at Christmas on the radio. I said, "I can't get the fire out." He said, "I told you, put the fire out." Okay. I went back. I took the 2.5. I hooked up the deluge gun. I wiped the entire bank out with the deluge gun. Well, he was getting all the calls. They had to stop the trains because the trains couldn't come through. And so I come back. Farrell Christmas is jumping all over. "What'd you do?" I said, "You told me to put the fire out." "I know, but I didn't tell you to wipe." "You told me to put the fire out." And we laughed for years after that. But I put the fire out. I did.
I bet he was hot.
He was hot. And right, I look back now, I said, how stupid was I to do that?
Just young. He told you put the fire out.
He told me to put the fire out.
You did what he told you.
You know how that is.
Yeah, you did what he told you. So what's one thing the public might not realize about the role of being a magistrate?
Well, we meet twice a month, and that's all by law you're required to do. But we're out looking at, people will call, we're looking at ditches, we're looking at roads. We go to meetings in Frankfurt. We do different things, and we field a lot of phone calls. And that's the job, and I enjoy that part of it. And there's always a challenge. One of our missed challenges is we get a lot of call about state roads, which we have absolutely nothing to do with. State roads are governed by the state. And so there's nothing we can do. And so I get chewed out over a lot of state roads, and they definitely need work. A lot of county roads definitely need work. Yeah. But I think that's the key that a lot of people say, well, they get their check and they meet twice a month. But all of our magistrates are very active, very hands-on.
Yeah.
We've got a great road department, especially when it's snow. Yeah. That's when it really gets, your phone really burns up.
Oh, yeah, they burn them up.
We try to encourage people. The misconception, we don't have a big budget. Muhlenberg County, land-wise, is one of the biggest counties in the state, land-wise, not population. And so, for example, I'll do the state. The state has to go out first and do the parkway. Well, that's what, 12 miles one way, 17 miles the other. Well, you got to double that because you got to come back when you're scraping the road. Then they come back and do 431. Then they do 62. So there's a priority lift. Well, people can understand why 171 or maybe 1379 at Nelson Creek, how come they ain't come out here yet? Well, they've only got 7 or 8 dump trucks. Well, then people, and same thing with the county. Mm-hmm. You know, we've got to go out and, you know, clear roads all over the district, and they've only got 7 or 8 dump trucks and graders and snow plows and things like that. And so it takes time to do that.
Yeah, especially when it's still snowing.
Still snowing. Yeah. And people don't understand, like, why they're doing the parkway, but they didn't do my road out here in Clayton. Yeah. Well, there's priorities, you know, because people travel those. We try to do as many as we can. But that's one of the misconceptions of magistrate and some of the things we do. And then you have the experts on Facebook. Oh, they say, well, you go to Todd County, you go to McLean County, their roads are clear. Well, again, some of those don't have parkways. They just have small state roads, and they can clear them out very quickly. But I think both the state and the county do a great job. We've got some good people on both that work hard and dedicate. They're out just like we are as firefighters. They're out all hours of the night taking care of roads and so forth. And so my hat's off to them.
Oh, yeah. We see them passing constantly.
Now, I worked at the state highway one time, and they put me on a snow plow. They didn't tell me how to do it. They just said, go plow down Graham. So I was down there plowing about 50, 60 miles an hour. I didn't know you're supposed to do it slow. And I hit a guy's dog out in the road, and it threw the dog straight up and threw him on the front porch and killed him. And they were complaining on me, killing their dog. I'm thinking, well, so how fast were you going up? 50, 60 miles an hour. You don't go that fast. Nobody told me. So,
you did what they told you.
That's it. I did what they told me. I took care of the road. Yep, I put the fire out.
Yep, yeah. That's the best way to do it. I did what you told me.
Yeah.
So has your background in EMS affected your decision-making once you enter the public office?
Oh, absolutely.
How so?
Well, learning that you can't please everyone. That's the key. But don't try to do 20 different things and halfway decent. Do 2 or 3 major things to be really good. You know, that's the key, because we get spread out. We want to do everything at one time. We want to please everybody, and you can't do that. So, and be honest with people. I've never, I have people on Facebook go, Malcom promised he would do this. I've never made a campaign promise at all. Of everything I've run for, I always said I will look into it, see what I can do, and I try. And sometimes you just can't make people happy. 90% of the people you do, it's those other 2 people that give you this gray hair that I have right here. But it's all part of it, and I'd love every minute of it.
So after decades of service that you've done, what core values do you think guide your decisions most?
Well, the man upstairs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the man upstairs is number 1. My Uncle John, who I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I valued his decisions, his input, and so forth. And to look back, I mean, somebody said, what you most, as being magistrate, what you proud of? I said, rails to trail. I said, we worked hard. Judge Rodney Kirtley, he was a Republican, I was a Democrat, didn't play into it. We didn't care what their party was. He got a grant to get the rails to trails. And believe it or not, there was a lot of opposition to the rails to trails. It was originally scheduled to go to Drakesboro. But what happened is when the railroad gave that land back, they gave it to government first, the local government. Mm-hmm. If the government didn't want it went back to the landowner. A lot of landowners would have been able to use the land to get some of their properties and some of their fields for this railroad land. Well, I understand that. Mm-hmm. But I see people walking on that trail every day, either on the Greenville end or Central City end. You'd be surprised who would call me was against it at the time. But my hat's off to Rodney Kirtley, and he worked hard on it. And it came down to a 3-2 vote on the court, or we wouldn't have got it.
Wow. People want their land and stuff. I would think that they would want that for the county. I don't know, back to the common sense thing. I understand people don't want to give up what's theirs, but I would have tried to find a middle ground. You know.
Well, it's like being sheriff. Will Ward does a great job as sheriff.
Oh yeah.
And people say, you need to go out there and arrest so-and-so. Don't arrest my son.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Oh, he didn't mean to. Now, you need to get them other people. So he lives that every day.
Oh, absolutely.
And he and his deputies do. And they do a great job. And it's tough being in law enforcement now. My hat's off to them. I support my sheriff's department. I would support the Central City Police Department 100% because they've got a no thank you job.
Absolutely.
When they go out on a call, they don't go out to make people happy.
Yeah.
They'd like to, wish everything, everybody like 911 show, have a picnic afterwards, but being law enforcement is not a picnic.
Yeah. And the worst part, I think, law enforcement's been so demonized in everything now, national news, everywhere. And personally, knowing these guys and them being friends, most of the time, they don't like what they have to do, but it's a tough job.
It's a tough job.
You have to do what you got to do.
And, a lot of their cases do have good turnout.
Oh, absolutely.
We've got some great offices here in Central City. I've worked with them. A real funny story. Back then, when I dispatched here, Central City had a dispatcher, Greenville had a dispatcher. We had one police officer on duty at night and two during the day. And we didn't have portable radios. So Charlie Fields, longtime police officer here, his duty, we had parking meters downtown Central City. And his duty was to get out of the car and collect that money. And the way I got a hold of him, if I had a call, I didn't have a lot of calls, but when I got a hold of him, we had two-way radios in the car, didn't have portable. So I had a little wind-up siren right outside the window on the television, two-way radio antenna, and I would go, crank it. When he heard that, he knew to go to his car and get on the radio. Late night, Perk Nelson was our night policeman. He worked in the mines during the day, and a lot of times he would try to catch a nap. And right outside the old city building, he would park. Well, one time, he was taking a nap. A dog comes up and licks him and scares him. He's hollering for help on the radio. And I'm trying to run over there and look, see what's going on. But the dog startled him and woke him up by licking him in the face. So he didn't live that down too well.
So, mayor of Central City, what ultimately motivated you to run for mayor?
Well, Tony Armour and David Rhodes have done a great job. It was an easy decision. Tony decided he didn't want to run again and want to do other things. And I was talking one day, and I was talking to my wife, and I said, you know what? Going about my aunt and uncle, they always said, you've ran for clerk, you've ran for magistrate. We'd love to see you run for mayor one day. So you need to be mayor of Central City. That's your town. That's where your heart is. And I thought long and hard after it, but our city is in good, sound financial shape. We got great police, fire, street department, water department. Everything's running good. So why not run for mayor? And then, I'm the cheerleader for our town. When I traveled all over the country and I'm doing these races and they introduced me Malcom West from Central City, Kentucky. And I was proud of that.
Yeah,
I want to take that with my connections with, racing and country music and what have you. And I see exciting things for our tourism and for our growth here in Central City.
Do you think that will be your top priorities for Central City is growth? Or?
I think growth depends on how you grow. There are controversial issues that sometimes people say, well, we need industry, but we don't need this industry.
Yeah.
The fellow that needs a job right now, he doesn't care what it is. He needs to feed his family. And if we can get those jobs in here, it may be a little controversial. Maybe, I'm not saying dangerous. I'm just saying something that we don't need that.
Yeah.
Well, let us make that decision. We're the one with all the facts. We just don't get on Facebook and say, we're going to get this plan A here just because we can. No, we research it, see how it affects other communities, and then we make that decision.
Yeah, and you guys have meetings with these people. It's not like they're just like, we want to put a business there. Like, you get their whole plan of what they're going to do. So y'all always have a lot more information than the public usually.
That's right. And they don't realize they've been working on it for a long time.
Yes, exactly.
Working on a long time. It's just not, we didn't just pick up phone and call. Although, when we got of course, the museum here in town, both the Motorsports Hall of Fame and the Music Museum. I had my little junk store up here. Oh, excuse me, classic stuff junk store. And a friend of mine by the name of Army Armstrong. He's a longtime racer. He was the first official announcer for the Bigfoot truck and
Oh, wow.
for the monster trucks and things like that. A friend of his by the name of Rooster Miller, she runs Windy Hollow Restaurant and Windy Hollow Speedway over in McLean County and Davis County. She said, we're looking for a place to move our motorsports museum. So we've rented a room here in Owensboro. I just got the place. So I went up and talked to Dr. Freddie Mays with tourism on the Lister Motors, the old Lister Motors where it's all located now. And they had all that space where they used to work on cars at Lister Motors. And I said, I have this opportunity to get a motorsports museum here. He said, bring it on. So we'll make it work. Tony Armour, David Rhodes said the same thing. We'll make it work. And we got it. And those are things you can look at and say, we've got that. Nobody else has that.
Yeah.
And those are the things I want to push and work on.
Yeah. And just a shout out to the museum and everything. Anybody listening has not been to check that out. Everybody should go, because I had worked here for probably 4 years before I ever went in there. And it's amazing. You would be shocked at what they got in there. And it's free.
It's free. Absolutely. You can make a donation if you want to, but you don't have to.
Yeah, you can go in. I mean, they got tons of old records from people from Muhlenberg County. They got NASCARs and monster trucks, a General Lee in there. The things they have in there, people wouldn't not believe it's right here in Central City.
Darrell Waltrip and I, we've worked a lot together in racing. He got his start, of course, racing locally. He and his dad, Lee Waltrip, used to load up their race car on an open trailer and drive to Nashville. Their first official sponsor was a little grocery store in Springfield, Tennessee, where they traded out sponsorship ads on the side of the car for bologna sandwiches and pop.
Wow.
And they packed that and they race at Nashville. And so I worked at the National Racetrack for a long time. And so Darrell, fast forward, everybody knows who he is. He's famous. He's on the stage with me. And we got to talking. He knew where Central City, Kentucky was. And his grandmother used to work with my aunt in GE. So Darrell's job that day was just to say, homie, gentlemen, start your engines. That was his job.
Yeah.
It's all scripted. You know, I just don't say, okay, let's do it. They tell me by headset, tell Darrell to say it. I said, okay, Darrell, they're ready for you. Let me tell you one more story about your aunt. You're going to love this. This is what she used to do with my grandmother. And he delayed the entire race for about 10 minutes telling me stories about my aunt, which I loved it. You know, NASCAR and them were having a fit up in the tire because they're on a TV schedule and so forth. But he was just a good old guy. And we're trying to get a car from him to put in the museum. We've got one from Jeff Green now. We've got his car on display, who's a former Busch Series champion and what have you. And so, but it pulls a lot of people in here.
Yeah, I was shocked when I actually went in and took time to look around and check that out. So everybody that knows you are absolutely hilarious and the most quick-witted person I've ever met in my life.
That gets me in trouble sometimes, but I'll go with that. Yeah, I've
never in my life met somebody that can just pop off at the snap of a finger or something that'll get a whole room in a serious situation laughing.
You know who taught me that? I'll give you Hugh Sweat, the former mayor of Central City, and Clarence Brewer Sr. And I'll tell a quick Hugh Sweat story. He was the stock car announcer. Clarence had built a dirt track here at the fairgrounds. It used to be a horse track. That's where Ellis Park started. A lot of people don't know that. Started here in Central City. And the reason he left and built it in Henderson, they had a wet-dry election, and it went dry because he wanted to sell alcohol down there. So fast forward, they sold it, come up for auction, Clarence and bought it, and I went to work for Clarence as a gopher. I was into horses. My uncle got mad because I got out of the horse business and got into the racing business. But Hugh Sweat was his first announcer, and I was his gopher. And I had a little squeaky voice. When Hugh had to go to the bathroom or do something, I was on the microphone. That's how I got started. Mm-hmm. And so one time we had a mud bog, and the JCs, Central City JCs, which was an organization, and they were sponsored. There's probably 50 people in the stands. It was a hot May day or late April. All of a sudden, coming out of the west was the Goodyear blimp, just coming over the track. And Hugh Sweat, and I got to do it my Hugh Sweat voice. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Central City JCs, let's welcome the Goodyear blimp Columbia. It's got a crew of 12 people coming by to say hello to us. It was on its way to the Derby in Louisville. It just happened. Its flight path come across Central City. He had no idea it was coming. Neither did I, or neither did the public. But he made it sound like they were coming to the Central City JC's Bud Bog. And that made the papers and everything. To this day, say, that Hugh Sweat, and they had the Goodyear blimp in Central City. So just great stories. That's where I get my quick wit, is from Hugh Sweat.
That is one of the most famous things about you, is just the one-liners that you just pop off. And I've got a bunch wrote down that I'm going to bring up later. Just like that, the one-liners that you pop off just at the right moment. Is it instinctive?
It's instinctive. Yeah, it is. It really is. I don't know. It scares me sometimes.
That's what I was always wondering. Was it instinctive, or was you always just sitting on it, waiting for the perfect moment?
Well, a blend of both. I keep things in the back, but I enjoy life. I really do. I live life to the fullest. If I croak out tomorrow, I've had a good life. I had a good time. I've got a great family. I've got a wonderful wife who's a nurse. She gets mad because when we started dating, somebody said, "What are you dating a nurse for?" I said, "At my age, you don't want to date a plumber." And so, but she takes my humor well, and she's pretty. She can hang toe-to-toe with me as well.
Yeah, she pops off. I've heard you guys.
Yeah, she's pretty good, but she doesn't realize, and I enjoy the public work, I don't mind it, but how many, and she's worked for public all her life, being an ER nurse for 30 plus years, as you know, but she doesn't realize how people will ask me questions where we're eating or somewhere, and I don't care, but they'll see you eating and they'll say, "Hey, I got a ditch that needs to be cleaned out. Can you do that?" They'll come up in a restaurant, and that's fine. But to her, I said, "I can't believe they ask you that." I've been at a funeral of my grandmother when I was county clerk, and Jimmy Raleigh, who was working at Tucker's at the time, he come to me, he said, "You've got a phone call." So I went back 10 minutes before my grandmother's funeral started, and it was a guy who wanted to sign his dad's name to a title. He said, "I hate to bother you." "No, you didn't."
Yeah, obviously.
I'm at my grandmother's funeral, but I told him the girls took care of his problem for him. But that's just, and you get it, I'm sure you get it too.
All the time. So in high-stress environments like EMS, public meetings, magistrate meetings, how important is timing when it comes to your one-liners and humor?
Well, it's pretty important, especially what the topic is. Now, I'm babbling here. I probably just went over my time limit here already, but
no.
It's important, and it loosens the stress in the room.
Oh, absolutely.
It loosens the stress, and I get Mac McGee laughing all the time, or some of the other magistrates' fiscal court meeting, and it just comes out sometimes.
Yeah,
it just comes out. But that's me. That's what I want to be known for.
So, over your last 50 years of service, what's one of the stories that still make you laugh every time you think about it?
Oh my gosh, I've got so many of them. My buddy Joe Williams we've traveled. He's an announcer out of Nashville. He's in the Tennessee Motorsports Hall of Fame, and just a great guy. He's been on ABC. He's been on every network there is, and he's pretty well the same way. I was on the stage doing Memphis, and our microphone, we have cordless mics, and they have somebody that runs those. This is the Bush race. This is on national television. My microphone quits as I'm getting ready to introduce the pastor who's going to give the invocation. So I have my two-way radio on. My buddy Joe in the tower said, "Just go with me and move your lip." So I'd already introduced the pastor. I hand him the mic. It's not working. It's already quit. The preacher starts moving his lips. Joe Williams is doing the invocation in the tower. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, dear Heavenly Father, welcome to the race. Keep everybody safe." The preacher's going, of course, I can't see this on your podcast, but he's moving his lips like he's saying it. And so just things like that just really stick out.
So what are some funny things that's happened on a call that you definitely can't make up? Like, people just won't believe it.
Some I can't tell because this is a rated G, but just thinking of the people, I may get in trouble on HIPAA. HIPAA, of course, you're not supposed to talk about people's condition, but I had a fellow one time, the call come in, Paige said he couldn't walk. But we get to his trailer, knock on the door, he opens up the door, and then he goes back and lays back down in the bed. And I said, "Sir, I thought you couldn't walk." "Well, I can't most of the time." But he had opened up the door. That kind of sticks in my mind. But then he said he wanted to take a service animal with him to the hospital. And I said, "Okay." I'm looking around for a dog with a little vest, or something like that. I said, "Where's he at?" He said, "He's out in his cage." I said, "Out in his cage?" He's a chicken. He had a service animal. His support animal was a chicken. And I said, the only place that chicken's going is Kentucky Fried Chicken. I said, we can't take a chicken in the ambulance, but just, just stories like that really stick out in your mind.
Well, some of the stories that I've remembered and that I've heard people talk about is one of the famous ones is when the woman had a knife and you used your finger guns to make her drop it.
I did,
when
yeah.
y'all were trying
One of the Greenville farmers was with me on that. I come in there and she had a knife coming at us, and I said, I put my hand up and I said, drop the knife now or I'll shoot you. And she dropped the knife. So you never know what you find, or you ask people, and a lot of times they're too honest for their own good. This one guy came out and said he was having a heart attack. I said, do you take drugs? He said, well, yeah, I do. I said, well, there's a lot of bad drugs on the scene. I said, do you have any more drugs here? He went out and come out with a whole basket full of illegal drugs, with a deputy standing right next to me who's now grinning from ear to ear like, boy, have you goofed up, and he said, they can't take my drugs. And, oh, yes, they can. So,
well, I've seen you do certain things like make people admit to stuff all the time. When this wasn't too long ago, there was a woman who had been using drugs and she was telling us she wasn't. Well, you pull out your phone and was like, well, let me just type in my drug scanner here. And you act like you stick it to her forehead and you're like, yep, it's telling me right now that you've been using. She's like, okay, yeah, I used this morning.
Works every time. Yeah. Works every time. I had a real nasty drunk. He was just being hateful, and I'm putting him on a heart monitor for the paramedic. I said, oh, my God. He said, what's wrong? I said, I meant to make my car payment today and forgot about it. just things like that. So lucky I'm still have a job today.
There's another one, another famous one I can remember is somebody was cleaning out an old rental property or something, and they were using a bunch of different cleaning chemicals, and they had pretty much mustard gassed themselves. And you walk in, and the guy's eyes are all red and swollen, and they're all snot and watered, and he was like, oh, no, man, it looks like you got a bad case of the dingy fever. And,
I did.
And the guy was like, what did he say? He was like, oh, no, is that bad? And he was like, well, it ain't good.
Yeah. Well, also, too, some guy was faking a heart attack, and Scotty Walker was my paramedic. And I said, well, I can look at your toes and tell you if you're having a heart attack or not. I said, I use the eeny, meeny, miny, mo test. He said, what's that? I said, I took your toes, and when I get to mo on your big toe, if it hurts, then you'll holler out. And I said, eeny, meeny, miny, and he screams in agony when I got to mo. And poor Scotty, I thought was just going to fall out of the ambulance. Tim Carver and I, same scenario. We walked in, guys faking a heart attack. And I said, if I squeeze your thigh on your leg, and if it hurts, you're having a heart attack. I squeezed it. He let out a big roar. Tim Carver had to leave the room. He couldn't stay in there with it. So sometimes, it's part of the healing process, I guess you would say.
You cracking those jokes and stuff just help lighten the whole room, not just for them, but I've heard family members just start dying laughing.
I know.
It just totally.
And it scares me sometimes,
yeah.
But I'm glad it works that way sometimes.
Yeah.
And on the other flip of the coin, we have people that said, hey, I'm dying. I mean, a matter of fact, just saying it, not scared. They're saying, and they do.
Oh, yeah.
They know.
Quite a few times. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Here one time, I said, if you wind up with the old electric sirens, the Federal Qs, that were the only siren. We didn't have electronic sirens. And we had him convinced that if you wind it up to a high pitch, it would change the red light at the intersections.
Uh-huh.
And we watched him one day, and he fired that sucker up. I said, I know what he's getting ready to do. And he busted through a red light because it didn't change. Almost hit a car. I quit telling the firefighters that then. He said, you told me it would change the light. It didn't. He was right. It wouldn't do it, but we had told him that it would.
So this actually happened not too long ago. The gynecologist story.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, we're on a call.
Just saying that just makes it, people are listening now. What did he say, gynecologist?
Yes. Yeah. So we're on a call. A guy has, I don't know, his catheter's messed up. Something's wrong with it. Well, Malcolm comes in and they say, well, you're in luck. Dr. West just came here. And Malcolm goes, yep, yes, sir, I'm a gynecologist.
Yeah.
And that guy's like, well, you ain't going to do no good here.
I forgot about that. That's true.
Yeah, off the rip. He had no idea we was going to call him Dr. West.
I was Shriner Clown. A lot of people don't realize that. I had a lot of fun helping Shriners Hospital. Did that. I traveled all over the country. I could tell some good stories there, but again, it has to be at the 9 o'clock late night show on some of those stories that happened when we were trying clowns. But we just like I said, I've loved life. I've loved being involved in the community, and to see these young firefighters, I aggravate them a lot. One time I went out to the prison. They had a new medical person out there, and they pushed me aside. They're putting these electronic handcuffs on, and I said, "You just killed him." "What do you mean I just killed him?" "That electronic stuff you put on it just wiped our monitor out." "Oh my God, I didn't mean to." And just things like that. So sometimes I maybe go overboard a little bit on it.
Well, I think that's what makes you so welcoming. Why so many people like you and know you is because it doesn't matter. You're you no matter what. It does, like, even in a serious situation, you're liable to say something that just breaks up everything. And I think that's why people like you so much. You're the same with everybody.
Well, I appreciate that. And I was raised, like I said, by my grandmother in Nelson Creek. She was 92 years old when she passed away. Excuse me. And she was doing the old wringer washer. She was doing 3 loads of clothes on her back porch, started having chest pain. She went to the hospital and passed away. Her sister was over there, and they, of course, told her she had passed away. And she said if she hadn't dipped that old stuff, she'd lived a good long life. I said, my gosh, she was 92 and doing wringer washer. I want to be doing that.
Yeah,
So, but
I need to start dipping snuff.
Yep, I had a tough old family. Like I said, my aunt and uncle, he worked in logwood, she worked at GE, just good, hardworking people. And I always said, that's me. I'm not rich, never have been, never, apparently at my age, that ain't going to happen. But I've had a blessed life. I really have. And being able to serve the public, whether it be free as a fireman or making a salary as a magistrate, it all means the same to me.
Yeah, taking care of the community you
Taking
love.
care of the community, that's the key.
How important were those moments when you would crack everybody up, everybody get to laugh, and keeping morale up over the years?
Very important. You take for granted that we've seen a lot of bad things. And I aggravate when I'm introducing I said, I bet these young paramedics, I said, I bet you've seen a lot of bad things. They go, oh yeah, I have. and I have too. But the humor gets us through it.
Absolutely,
as you know. You live it every day. And I encourage people that I won't say criticize emergency service, depends on what any fire department here. Come on down and be one.
Yes,
come on down and be one. You don't have to be trained in everything. You have to have required hours and so forth, but there's something there for you to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's directing, we had one guy, we called him Giggles. That was his name. He giggled all the time. He was a Graham fireman. His job was to direct traffic and loved it. I mean, he lived for a run to direct traffic. You can do that, or you can be working. You don't have to work on the patient. There's people that do that. We do that.
Yeah.
But directing that, keeping those cars off of us on a wreck or something is just as important as working on that patient. Because we might be the next patient when we get run over, and that's come close pretty time. Yeah. I watched a police officer here at Central City one time. We used to have the big, long, at 61 battery flashlight. He got mad at a car and threw that flashlight through the rear window. Got in trouble. He was okay with it. But sometimes, the pressure cooker valve goes off.
Yeah, I've seen you scream at cars before on the subject.
Get me out on the parkway. That's the key right there. Get me out on the parkway. Yeah. If you want to get mad as a firefighter or a police officer, direct traffic on the parkway. I mean, they're running by looking at 90 miles an hour going past you. You're not slowing down.
After all these years of working nights in all these old buildings, hospitals, courthouses, this is the part where I do it with everybody. I try to get if you've had any unexplainable ghost stories, something that you still can't explain to this day.
We took a patient one time to behavioral health in Bowling Green. And if I didn't have a witness, Bobby Myers was my paramedic then.
I remember Bobby.
He had whipped 2 Central City policemen basically in our ambulance crew the night before over some of the drugs he was on. We took him to behavioral health in Bowling Green. And he would look at me. He said, "You're going to die." I'm in the back of the ambulance with him. "You're going to die." And I could feel him kind of reaching down in my soul. Mm-hmm. And when Bobby opened up the ambulance to get him out of the ambulance, she said, sweat was just dripping off him. I mean, I'm the biggest BSer. We've done proved that in this interview. He out BS me. Okay, didn't think a thing about it. This behavioral health, there's no ambulance in here. You go right where everybody's sitting at. We're sitting up there checking him in. He's on the stretcher. This little old lady comes up and pushes us out of the way and takes her finger and points at our patient and says, "You've got the devil in you. You need to be in church. You got the devil in you." And we thinking, grandmother? She was just sitting in there. And she knew that he was possessed by the devil. So I wouldn't tell that story if it didn't happen, but those were the kind of the stories that stick out. You always heard noise in the old city building. Mm-hmm. We used to have water fights. We would start out with a water hose. And of course we had the fire pole we actually used to slide down. Mm-hmm. We would wet the fire pole and then let them chase us. And then they would just slide 90 miles an hour because that pole was wet down to the lower level of the fire truck. Mm-hmm. So,
looking forward, what kind of city would you like to see Central City become in the next 10, 20, 30 years?
I'd like to see Central City become the city it used to be years ago. You know, when the storefronts were all full, people were walking the streets. Mm-hmm. People talked to their neighbors instead of looking at their phone. You know, they turned off the TV and they had supper at the table with their families and asked how their families were doing. So I think sometimes it's good to go backwards to go forward.
Absolutely.
And that's how I would like to see Central City with more businesses, of course. You know, we'd all like to have big factories. We just don't have the workforce to do that. But let's work with our local businesses to make them grow.
Yeah.
Let's do that. You know, and that's a start.
Yeah.
Use our connections of whatever they have. Like Mayor Armour's done a great job. David Rhodes has done a great job on doing that, on their connections. And I want to make the city council more involved and more active because same thing with my uncle sitting around a table feeding people. He's the one to come up with the idea that we never thought of.
Yeah.
One of our city council people may have an idea that may work. Yeah. And that's what I want to do. But I want to see Central City like it used to be.
Yeah. Closing out, getting close to being done here. What advice would you give any young people considering a career in public service or being a first responder?
Be knowledgeable of what you're about to talk about before you talk about it. Mm-hmm. You know, just like on Facebook, we have some keyboard warriors who have the answers to everything. Research, research. Look at what you're talking about, but don't be scared to get involved. Just like right now, people pass wrecks. They'll call them in, but they won't stop it. People think I'm trying to hurt somebody. If you just talk to those people, you don't have to be an EMT or a first responder. Be a person. Be a human being to these people and talk to them till the qualified people or even me get there.
So after all your years of service, political service, emergency response service, what are you most proud of?
That my aunt and uncle were proud of me. I made them happy that I turned out like I did. Because this day and time, with the advent of drugs and everything else, it's not how you were raised anymore. Raising is very important, but it's a flip of the coin.
Yeah.
And so they flipped the coin the right way and helped raising me, and my grandmother the same way. And get involved in your community. Just don't gripe about it. I'm going to say it. Don't bitch about it. Do something about it.
Yeah.
Don't be involved. Be the answer. Don't be the problem.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, I like that. Let me write that down. I didn't like that one.
I'll send you a copy.
All right, thank you.
Last question, and then I'll let you go. What message would you like to leave with the citizens of Central City today, knowing that you're coming into office next year as the new mayor of Central City?
I just like Tony, I'll be accessible. Mm-hmm. You know, I want to hear, to us, different problems have different levels. To me, trying to get industry as a magistrate in here and doing things, but to one person, getting that pothole fixed in front of their house is just as important.
Yeah.
Mayor Daley said that in Chicago, that take care of your neighborhood. That's, that's politics. Is that neighborhood that can't get that pothole fixed or get garbage picked up or what have you. So don't be scared to come in and ask your officials. Call them out. Well, even on Facebook, most of magistrates and people, mayor, everybody, they're on Facebook. Yeah. Send them a question. We'll be glad. That's what we're here for. You're paying our salary. Yeah. Now, as a volunteer, that's a little different. There's no salary. There's just the fact we're coming to help you. We'll come. But on the political level, we work for you.
Yeah.
Let us know about it.
Well, Malcolm, I just want to say thank you for your service, first off. Not just first response, but political service everything you do for this county, everything you're continuing to do for this place. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being a role model to some of these younger guys, because you're right. I've heard some of these younger guys, we show up on a bad scene, they're losing their mind. You show up and just immediately everybody's like, oh, thank God. You know, so I just want to thank you for being you, taking your time with these younger guys, because I was one too. You know, I can remember being that guy. I was like, oh, thank God Malcolm's here. So I just want to say thank you for that. Thank you for coming on today. I know everybody's been so excited to hear this. I can't thank you enough for actually taking time, because I know you're busy. I know you're always around doing stuff in the community. So just thank you for taking time to come talk and let everybody listen to you today, what you have to say.
Well, thank you for, making this podcast, doing it. You see you open up the door and open up the curtain like in the Wizard of Oz and see behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And we're all human beings. I mean, we cry too.
Mm-hmm.
We hurt too. When we pick up one of your relatives in a bad wreck, and whether they didn't make it or not make it, it hurts us as much. Mm-hmm. I know it's your father, your son, or your daughter out here has been hurt. It hurts us too. We take that home with us, and we don't forget that. We really don't. And everybody says you've seen it all. Nah, I could say that right now, and we'll have a run in 15 minutes. Can't believe I saw that.
Yeah.
So you're always seeing there. But thank you. I love serving. I want people to know that when I croak out, that I love doing what I do.
I just can't thank you enough, man. You're a role model to so many people, and thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.